If California were its own country, it would be the world's fourth largest economy.
It's bigger than India, bigger than the UK, and it just became bigger than Japan's economy.
The state of California seems to be setting the pace when it comes to economic growth.
The only economies ahead of California are the entire US, China, and Germany.
The craziest part here is that California's economy didn't just grow quietly.
California did this while people were leaving, some of the biggest companies left, Hollywood is in decline, and while critics declared the state finished after the pandemic.
More and more Californians choosing to move out of state.
And California lost more than 800,000 residents between 2020 and 2023, a decline not seen since World War II.
Much of this was because California was facing a massive surge in housing costs, rising crime, and a crazy homeless crisis.
But despite that, how does one state with 39 million people produce way more economic value than countries with 100 million people? After surviving a high-profile impeachment effort in 2021, California's governor actually points to California's strong economic growth as a massive win. He uses it to show that you can have both a booming economy and progressive values.
But how is this happening?
How is a single US state outpacing entire countries, even as the narrative here is around exodus and decline?
California's biggest economic engine by far is tech.
Yes, some companies like Oracle and HP relocated to Texas, and Elon Musk famously moved Tesla's HQ to Austin. But the real drivers of growth, Apple, Google, Meta, Nvidia, and OpenAI, are all still headquartered in California. To put it in perspective, Apple alone is worth more than $3.5 trillion. That's more than the GDP of the UK. Nvidia added $1 trillion in market value in under 18 months, largely due to the AI boom. And OpenAI, currently valued around $80 to $90 billion, is based in San Francisco, along with other AI giants like Anthropic and Scale AI.
California's startups pulled in about $78 billion in venture capital funding in 2023. That's nearly half of all VC money in the entire United States.
Yes, costs are high and competition is brutal, but California still dominates because of deep talent pools, top-tier universities, and an unmatched innovation ecosystem. Stanford, Berkeley, and Caltech all rank among the top 15 in the world. And they're not just academic, because they've produced the founders of Google, Netflix, Nvidia, and dozens of other billion-dollar ideas. Berkeley leads in public research, Caltech punches way above its size with Nobel Prize winners, and Stanford is basically embedded in Silicon Valley. The UC system has nearly 300,000 students and files more patents than any other university system on Earth.
That said, the long-term question here is this: can California hold on to this lead?
States like Texas and Florida are offering lower taxes, fewer regulations, and increasingly attractive tech ecosystems.
California's film and TV industry is shrinking.
And fast. Back in 2014, it contributed over $50 billion to the state's GDP, making up nearly 5% of California's entire economy. Today, that share has dropped a lot. Fewer productions are being filmed in state, post-production is moving abroad, and streaming giants are cutting costs. Meanwhile, states like Georgia have overtaken California in annual film shoot volume thanks to aggressive tax incentives. So what was once a cultural and economic cornerstone is now struggling to keep its footing.
Let's go into the numbers.
In 2023, only 18% of major film productions were shot in California. That's down from 64% in the late 1990s. The 2023 writers and actors strikes shut down Hollywood for 6 months, causing an estimated $6.5 billion in economic losses in Southern California alone. Studios like Netflix and Amazon are shifting more production to New Mexico, Canada, and even Europe to cut costs. While services like Netflix and Disney Plus are still headquartered in California, their global production arms are decentralized.
Fewer jobs, fewer union protection, and far less guaranteed work in LA.
And with AI-generated content, synthetic actors, and ultra-realistic virtual sets advancing quickly, Hollywood's role as the world's content engine is, facing a massive crisis. Yes, films like Barbie and Oppenheimer were big wins in 2023, but they were the exceptions, not the rules.
The broader trend here is that Hollywood's monopoly on global storytelling is breaking apart.
But Hollywood's slowdown hasn't derailed California's broader economic growth. Other sectors like tech, AI, biotech, and clean energy have more than picked up the slack. So while Hollywood no longer drives California's identity the way it used to, the state has moved to other engines of power.
Over 75% of California's fruits and nuts are grown in California.
Agriculture is still one of California's biggest economic sectors, worth over $50 billion a year, employing nearly 420,000 people.
But this sector faces a long-term threat: water.
Years of drought, unpredictable rainfall patterns, and over-dependence on groundwater are are making agriculture harder and more expensive. Crop yields are declining and farmers are either reducing production or moving operations out of state. California almonds, they were once a booming export, have seen prices collapse due to oversupply and environmental pressure. And if water access continues to deteriorate, California's agricultural dominance won't disappear overnight, but it will weaken.
So what's surprising here is that it's no longer the backbone of California's economy.
See, a few decades ago, it played a much bigger role in the state's GDP. Today, it makes up less than 3% of California's total economic output. Now, that doesn't mean it's not important, especially for rural communities, but it does mean that the rest of California's economy is so large and diversified that even major setbacks in agriculture haven't stopped overall growth. While fields in the Central Valley dry up, AI labs in San Francisco and biotech firms in San Diego are adding billions in new value. So while agriculture may be in decline, it's no longer what defines California's future.
Where California is clearly ahead is in clean energy and climate tech.
Over 40% of U.S. residential solar is installed in this state, and 1 in 4 new cars sold here are electric. By 2035, all new vehicles sold in California must be zero emission, although this mandate is facing legal challenges by the federal government. See, this state is also a global hub for climate venture capital. Startups here focus on carbon capture, battery storage, hydrogen fuel, and grid infrastructure.
But that leadership comes at a cost.
See, California's strict environmental rules make it more expensive to build and manufacture. Permits take years, grid infrastructure lags behind demand, and despite the green push, the state still suffers from blackouts, especially during heat waves. Still, if California becomes a net exporter of clean energy solutions, this might be a long-term win, not just economically, but geopolitically as well.
For 3 years in a row, California's population kept going down.
The biggest outflows were to Texas, Florida, Nevada, and Arizona. People fled because of high housing costs, high taxes, quality of life issues in major cities like San Francisco and LA. In fact, San Francisco's office vacancy rate hit 35% in early 2024. That was one of the highest in the country. By the way, I made videos in Texas to talk to people who moved there from California to see if they were actually happy with their decision. Make sure you hit subscribe so you can catch that video and more videos like this. Companies left too. In just 2 years, over 350 major businesses relocated their HQs out of California. But strangely, California's GDP kept rising by over $500 billion between 2021 and 2023. Why?
Because the people leaving weren't the same people that are running the billion-dollar tech companies.
They were largely middle-income residents, remote workers, and retirees. Meanwhile, high-growth sectors like AI, biotech, and EVs were still growing fast enough to offset the outflows. But this trend isn't sustainable forever. If California can't fix its housing crisis and its cities continue to struggle with homelessness, affordability, and crime, economic productivity could eventually just start to decline.
California's governor makes the state's economic power a core part of his national image.
He regularly brags about the state's GDP numbers, green economy stats, and progressive values as proof that you can have both economic growth and social equity. After California passed the UK, he called it proof that our policies work. He clapped back at Florida's Ron DeSantis using economic comparisons in political ads and on national TV. But the narrative is a little bit more complicated than the messaging.
Yes, California is growing.
But California still struggles with big problems. Its poverty rate is about 13% higher than the US average. Income inequality here is sharp. The richest 1% earn over 20% of the state's income, and regulatory red tape ranks it near the bottom for business climate, slowing housing and driving up costs. Newsom's team sees California as a global model, but the rest of the country sees a state with a budget deficit approaching $45 billion and a housing crisis that shows no signs of slowing down.
So, since California's economy surpassed the size of Japan's economy,
will it pass Germany's next? As of 2024, Germany's GDP is about $4.5 trillion. California's $4.4 trillion.
The gap is closing fast.
And Germany is facing serious headwinds: an aging population, slowing exports, and the energy crisis caused by Russia's war in Ukraine. Manufacturing is struggling and its economy contracted in 2023. Meanwhile, California is benefiting from the global rise of AI, the strength of the US dollar, and the scale of its tech sector. So yes, perhaps California could surpass Germany, but that's assuming tech continues booming, green energy scales profitably, and California doesn't sabotage itself with bad infrastructure, red tape, or deepening inequality.
So it's not inevitable, but it's very possible.
The thing that makes California so big is its diversity in industries and people.
See, most countries really heavily depend on one or two economic pillars.
But California has so many, from tech, media, agriculture, biotech, clean energy, and AI. This mix gives it resilience, and demographically, California is one of the most diverse places places on Earth, which fuels global connections, immigration-driven entrepreneurship, and cultural exports. It's also home to 9 of the top 25 research universities in the world, which keep churning out the next generation of inventors, founders, and researchers.
And that's hard to replicate. California ranks 48th out of 50th when it comes to being business-friendly.
But honestly, the more time I spend here, the more I realize it's not just about business or money. A lot of it is actually the weather, that year-round beautiful weather that draws people in and keeps them here. There's a study showing millennials are willing to take a pay cut for work that feels more meaningful to them. And to me, California is a perfect example of that mindset. Despite all its flaws, the high costs, the housing crunch, the inequality, people still choose California. Not because they can afford a bigger house or save more money. In fact, it's the opposite here. But because for many, this is where they can just actually live better. Sometimes quality of life isn't about the numbers on paper, it's about the everyday moments.
At least that's what 39 million people would say. But I want to know, what do you think? There's always a lot of debate on this topic, but I want to know, do you think California can and will continue to grow? So let me know below, and don't forget to check out more videos like this, and to help support this channel, subscribe at Uptin.